Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special edition of, and they're all very special to me, edition of Out of Curiosity with Jason Velasco. I hope you have enjoyed our previous episodes. Today, I've got a really cool one with someone that I love talking to just in general. And I think you would enjoy some of the conversations we'll have today. So let me introduce to you today, Mike Quartararo. Hi, Mike. How you doing today?
Good, Jason. Thanks. How are you? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. And so hopefully, number one, I don't know if everyone knows from a timing perspective, Ida went through New York City this week. So you're holding up okay there? Did you have any challenges with flooding and you're safe?
Yeah, no, I'm actually a little above sea level, so we're good here. The ocean is about a mile away. We did get like 7 inches of rain here, but you know, the storm sewers held up, and we're doing okay, unlike many other people, I understand. So
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
I'm grateful as always.
Yeah, I'm currently in Jersey right now, and some of my friends got pretty hammered. People were like texting me, "Do you know anybody with pumps?" So
Yeah.
it's a hard thing. All right, well, anyways, let's jump into it a little bit. So, Mike, how you been doing, man? It's been crazy year for with pandemic, and you've been doing some great work with ACEDS, and maybe if you just quickly introduce yourself, and we can talk about your background a little bit more.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mike Quartararo. I am the president of ACEDS. Listen, before we go, I just want to say, you're one of those people in the industry that I feel bad about not talking to often enough. So I'm particularly thrilled to be here. I value your views. Most people won't know, but I'm happy to share that you helped me get started in my consulting practice, and always been a great advisor and mentor, and I appreciate that. So apologies for not staying in touch more, but happy to be here.
Well, thank you, Mike, and it's likewise. I appreciate all the insight and advice you've given me through the years. So let's talk a little bit about your background, because I mean, a lot of people know you as kind of the president of ACEDS now, and you've been very visual out there, and people have seen what you've been doing. You do a lot of content generation, and ACEDS as a community is pretty important. But let's talk about how you got started in this space. I mean, I know that you started at Skadden back in the day. I think you worked with the man, the myth, the legend that was Steve Shankroff. And so talk to me a little bit about how you went from being a legal assistant to working in the technology side.
Yeah, so I mean, the career started really in food service, if I'm going to be honest.
I think we talked to Sri Sharma about that, didn't we? There's I only hired people that worked in food service before.
Yeah, no, and I was the highest paid dishwasher in New York. And then you start as the dishwasher, you move into the kitchen proper, and then you're serving and bussing, and you do the whole thing. And eventually, in my younger years, I actually ran a deli, which was challenging, but nonetheless, legal career really launched in the 90s. Skadden was the stronghold for me. As a paralegal, you kind of touch whatever the lawyers are touching, and so it really became interesting to me to sort of see how the matters progress, and all the nuance and the arguments and the contentiousness between parties, and how to sort of that thrush and parry of the legal process. And so that's what really got me fascinated. And then of course the law, just always been interesting to me. Government, the law, how governments work, how the laws guide behavior and policy, and that's always been interesting to me. So, but paralegal, spent some time in law school, wasn't for me, didn't want $100,000 in debt. And so yeah, Skadden is the first place I really landed at. Spent about 10 years there.
But how did you transition into technology? Because I think that's really a key thing.
The pivot really happened in the late 90s, right? Like e-discovery really wasn't even a word. We just called it scanning and coding, right? Although e-discovery was happening, right? Computers had started to land on everyone's desk at work. And it became very clear that, people weren't writing on paper anymore. They were typing emails and Word documents, or WordPerfect documents, I think we were using back then. And it became really clear really quick that electronic documents was where the evidence was going to be. So we had to figure out back then what were very crude ways to get documents out of computers. And so this is the late 90s, and you can imagine what's going on around then into 2000. There's Enron, there's WorldCom, there's all these, the .com bust, right? So all kinds of litigation flying, and work at a place like Skadden, you know, they're knee deep in that kind of work. So
Yeah.
it was a life-changing experience for me. I was involved with a matter that had like 45 parties and all these underwriters, banks, you know, tons of law firms. And, you know, the doc review wound up being like 150 reviewers in like every Skadden office. And back then, you know, it was like 13 terabytes of data in 2000 was like, you know, petabytes today.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
And I just was looking at this mess that was in front of me, and we had no systems for managing all this. I forget the tool we're using. Documatrix was the tool we're using. Like, I don't even,
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't even know if Documatrix exists anymore.
It does within Epic. There,
Is it still there? I don't even know. But anyway, very early versions of this, like you couldn't do a lot, right? We were scanning and putting documents in there and just, you know, setting them up for a lawyer review. Anyway, long story short, I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And managing all these parties, you know, I'm a paralegal. I'm not like, you know, managing doc review yet. That wasn't even really a thing. Of course, doc review was happening, but we weren't doing it online yet. It became really clear to me that there had to be a better way to manage all these parties, the courts and all this. So we built a little database in-house, just in Access, nothing fancy. And that was the turning point, man. I never looked back from there.
So how did you learn the database stuff? Is that something you just kind of picked up on your own? Did you have a mentor?
Yeah, something like, I've always been fascinated by computers. Somebody posted the other day on LinkedIn, like, when was the first time you touched a computer? And I think it was, I want to say it was 1980, 81, a Commodore 64 from Sears Roebuck.
Nice.
And so and my dad was in computers. My dad was an IBM exec. So like, I always wanted to be like my dad. So obviously I followed in his footsteps in some regard. But yeah, always fascinated with computers. I said, there's just got to be a better, more efficient way to manage these big matters. And, you know, that was it. Microsoft Access is so easy to use, even more so today. It's like drag and drop. Back then, you actually had to do some work.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we built a database. We started managing it. Everybody loved it. Wasn't long before they said, hey, you know, you seem to have a thing for this technology. So why don't you become our first, you know, database specialist? And, you know, they literally started a new department. And you mentioned Steve, who was a dear friend, and we lost Steve last year. Very sad. He was a great guy, and started working with the litigation technology group there, and just I never looked back, Jason. Just kept managing technology, next case after case, you know, it went from there.
Wow. And then, I mean, and what was always interesting to me is that, I mean, you're very similar from a career path for me. Is just, you know, you look at opportunities and just don't say no. You know,
that's a big problem for me even today.
Yeah. You and me both. But I think one of the things that, you know, then you, is from a technology perspective, you started looking at being a manager. So you went over to Stroock Stroock for many, many years. And that was really kind of, you started in a management role, if I'm not mistaken, and then you went into like a leadership role. So tell me about that journey in terms of going through a law firm as a non-attorney, and working with them and building out a program.
Sure. And I should say that some of that sort of leadership or management training started at Skadden. I was running, you know, big teams and supervising paralegals and junior attorneys. And, you know, when you get involved in, you know, the case management aspects of things, you're leading. And so in 2008, I left Skadden, joined Stroock to run their litigation support department, help build that team, insource everything. I found myself a manager. I was in over my head, let me be honest. As most people who move into management, I think, are, right? But, you know, you have your set of values, you have your principles, you have your vision for what it should look like, and you plot your course. And it's not rocket science. You're going to make mistakes, but you pick yourself up, you brush off, and you move on. You own those mistakes and you learn from them. I got particularly good at finding good people, and I was really proud of the fact that, you know, we had almost no turnover at Stroock. We built a really good department. At one point, it was, I think, 12 people managing all the firm's litigation support, e-discovery projects, and I think we left it in good shape.
So let me go back to a point that you had made. You kind of, I don't want to leave it in passing. So one of the things you said is you went in and you started to insource things. And so and there was a specific trend, especially probably when you were there, that for attorneys to look at e-discovery as a potential profit center, which is we're going to insource things, turn it into a billable resource, bring in technology. What kind of drove that decision for you to, what was that decision you made in terms of, or is that something that the partners made? Let's start there.
I certainly, they asked me to make the decisions. They asked me to run it. They said, it's your area. I didn't do it in a vacuum. I did it with their advice and consent. They articulated to me that there's a need for more efficiency. We can't wait for vendor XYZ to, not be working on someone else's stuff to work on our stuff. So it became a matter of urgency. The firm was very client focused in terms of providing good service and identifying efficiencies. And we just saw an opportunity to really, when I got there, the team was very small, but like I said, it doubled in size. We just saw an opportunity, and yeah, it wasn't a cost center anymore. We insourced the technology. We hired the staff to manage the technology. They had a great IT department led by one of my dearest and best friends. And so it just became a matter of efficiency and client services. It's a value add, at least it was then. I think the attitude has changed in the more than 10 years since I've made that step. I think that a lot more work is moving in-house, and law firms are less inclined to make those big investments and bring those things in-house. Although,
you mean in-house within the corporation, the client side?
Yeah, well, no, within the firm itself.
Oh, okay.
I think more work is moving to the corporate side, the corporate legal operations. The growth of that area of practice is really, I think, upsetting the law firm business model that we thought we had. But some firms are succeeding at it as well. So I think the true solution today, as we talk, is a hybrid. You've got some technology at the firm. The client has some technology. Outsourcing is still happening to some service providers, depending upon your needs, and you're just making it all work together. The thing is, what I observed, of course, many years after, is that, when this whole thing started in the 2000s, like that lit support director, that e-discovery director at a firm, that person was the center of the universe, right? They were pulling together not just the firm's resources, but also helping to manage the client and the vendor. And that's just not true anymore. The vendors at some point figured out, hey, we can go directly to the client. We don't need this law firm guy in the way here. And that's not a slight on anybody. That's just what happened. And so relationships started to form between corporations and vendors, and it kind of changed the dynamic. And hence you saw more work going in-house, because just like we realized at the firms early on that we can take charge of this process and provide efficient service to clients, the client began to realize, hey, we can do this even more efficiently than the law firm in some respects, not all respects. The one thing that law firms have that corporate legal departments will probably never have in abundance is lawyers.
Right?
They're very leanly staffed. They're always going to need law firms, right? And so that piece is always going to be, but some of the technology, things like legal hold, some of the compliance tools, matter management tools, things like that are starting to find their way into the corporate legal operations environment, and that's taking work away, I think, from the law firm.
Well, but I think also it may be taking certain types of work, which is where I think law firms have to adapt. But part of it is also creating, as we're learning more and more about dealing with these large scale projects, building efficiencies within the, the e-discovery workflow, if you would, right? So, yes, corporations can do certain things and they're learning what they can do well. And then I think at other points, which is they can, like, for example, they can do procurement, right? As you mentioned before, they're working directly with providers. So they're building panels of e-discovery providers and then working with the law firms of the selected providers and helping them build workflow. And so I think those are the kind of things that we're seeing, at least I've been seeing on the corporate side in terms of managing it. But I don't think, I think the outsourcing model, which includes the law firm, is there, no corporation is or organization is going to have all of the resources needed to manage large scale matters. And they're going to need resources from both their e-discovery providers and their law firms for any of these large scale projects. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's definitely what we're seeing. And I have the good fortune to sort of step back and from the perch on which I sit, look at the entire industry, because I'm in touch with the vendors, I'm in touch with the corporate legal departments, I'm in touch with the firms, consultancies, I kind of touch every part of the industry now. We're trying to educate all those segments. So it's interesting to see how the dynamic is changing, and it's been it's a sea change for someone who's been doing this for 20 years. But what are you going to do? You adapt and you find ways to make it work wherever you are.
Right. Well, I could spend literally hours probably talking to you about how law firm technology models and service models work, but I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about managing a team, and one of the interesting things that I love that what you did in your career, which is, as you were kind of in the last few years of your role at Stroock, you actually wrote a book on the definitive book, as far as I'm concerned, on dealing with project management and e-discovery. So tell me about what triggered you to actually put pen to paper and publish something.
Yes, it actually has nothing to do with the firm or any work I was doing at the firm for any client or anything. So in about 2012, I think it was the first ACEDS conference, and I've been involved with ACEDS for over 10 years. So I think you were too, early on. We helped design some of the learning materials and some of the exam questions. I think it was the first ACEDS conference down in Hollywood, Florida. A really tall guy approached me and said, "Hey, I just saw your session on how to build a lit support department. Would you be interested in doing some teaching?" And I was like, "I think so." He says, "Yeah, I want to build a whole curriculum around e-discovery at the university." He was then the president of a small school out west called Bryan University. And that turned into not just a teaching gig. And by the way, I tell everybody this, they think I'm crazy. Back then, we were using Zoom to teach.
Really?
Yeah. And
Zoom, people knew what Zoom was back then? That didn't cross my desk until 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. And we had some other platforms too, like Blackboard, and there was a bunch of learning management tools out there. But anyway, he approached me and asked if I would help him develop an e-discovery and project management platform. I'd been a big advocate of project management since I passed the PMP exam in the mid 2000s. And so that's really where it came from. As we started to build the curriculum, we realized there was no textbook. We were cobbling together articles from Sedona, from blog posts, and Law Technology News, and just this was what we were using to teach people things, to give them reading assignments and writing assignments to understand what e-discovery and project management was. And at some point, the folks at the university and some of the other board members there just said, "Hey, Mike, you seem to have a lot of time on your hands. Why don't you write a book?" So,
because that's what every director of litigation support has to
exactly.
So more time.
I started that in 2013, Jason. I didn't finish it till 3 years later. And thank goodness for the Long Island Railroad, because that's where I wrote the book. I had a notorious commute, 2 hours one way. So 4 hours a day I spent on the train, and I just used a laptop and started writing. And I really just, you can honestly see the book. It just maps the EDRM. There's nothing in that book that hasn't been said or done. I just put it on paper. You know what I mean? It was really just organizing the thoughts, and there's a lot of personal opinion in there, and a lot of good practices that could help people. And as I got closer to done, I started sharing it with people, and they're like, "This is a good book. This is a good book for students to understand where, how to get into this industry, how to really." It provides a lot of foundation, is what it is. And so, answer your question, it started as something that students needed, and now it's turned out to be something that kind of everybody reads. And good news, just finished the second edition. So,
nice. So what did you add to it?
So we added some material on legal operations. We added some material on vendor operations. We added material on search, which I can't believe I overlooked in the first edition. There was nothing in there. I mean, we mentioned search, obviously, you know, we search and use keywords for a lot of what we do, but there was nothing that really said, here's what search is, here's how to understand it, here's how to use it and validate it, right? So there's some stuff on that. There's an entirely new chapter on technology assisted review, predictive coding, a huge update to the information governance thing. You know, the whole world has kind of shifted left, right? Everybody's looking at information governance issues. And so, and that's a big bucket, right? And I don't go into, I look at it from the perspective of the e-discovery project manager, because anybody who works in this space knows that that IG piece, it really falls to the client in most instances.
Right, of course. And you know, our job is to inform, right, and to make sure that people know where their blind spots are from an IG perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so I don't get into, I mean, IG is a big umbrella topic. There's cyber, there's security, there's compliance, and of course there's e-discovery. So I just come at it from a little bit of the e-discovery perspective. What does the e-discovery project manager need to understand about information governance? And it dovetails nicely into the whole identification, preservation, collection, because that's what follows from that. If you've got good IG practices, it makes the e-discovery practice policies and practices much better.
Right. Well, I cannot wait to get my signed second edition. So is that going to be electronic, dot paper? How are you sending those out?
Both. We're going to put it out the same way we put out the other one. I'm self-publishing through my little LLC, and it should be ready in a couple months.
Okay, cool. So again, let me just, you know, can you tell everyone what the title is and what the—
Of course, it's Project Management and Electronic Discovery.
Pretty simple.
And you can read a little bit about it. I haven't posted anything about the second edition, but you can read a little bit about it on my website, which is edpmadvisory.com.
So breaking news, people, that's what's right here at Out of Curiosity. Get ready for the next edition of Project Management and e-discovery. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. So buy it on Amazon, buy it hard copy, and send me my signed copy. That's what I'm looking for. So
you're on the list.
I am on the list. So you made a very interesting change, because I know that you've played, you know, both in your role at the law firm. You've been, you know, you've been on the technology side in terms of working with people and implementing technology. You've been working with providers. You've been working with other law firms, and so, you know, you went into ACEDS. Could you tell us a little bit about, for those that for some reason don't know what ACEDS is, tell us what that is, and then how you entered the organization and what you're doing now.
Sure, and I should just fill in the gap here too. So after the book, you know, the world changed a little bit after the financial crisis, and after the book came out in 2016, I spent another couple of years at the firm. The book came out successful. I started to launch a consulting practice, did that for a couple of years, and then you know, the lead role at ACEDS opened up. Our friend Mary decided to step back, and the owners of ACEDS approached me and asked me, and so here I am. It's been a whirlwind, to be honest. It's almost 2 years now. And how did I do this? Why am I here? Why this change? It occurred to me, Jason, that if I look back at my career, and there's a whole long story about a job interview I had at a big corporation about, you know, that really helped me identify who I am. I know this happens, it happened really late in my life. I hope that young people figure this out much sooner, but the short story is that I came to understand myself as an educator. And that's what, and if you look back at my career, I've been teaching people technology for 25 years. I've been teaching people how to do things more efficiently for 25 years. I mean, and that's lawyers, that's paralegals, that's IT personnel, that's anybody in the legal industry, and sometimes people outside the legal industry. When you're doing that, and then you write a book about what you did, you're an educator. I don't care how you slice it. At the end of the day, ACEDS is an education organization. And so it just made perfect sense, you know, and I'm not by any means ready to retire, but, you know, they say in the latter years in your life, you wind up teaching, right? And so I feel comfortable doing it.
one quick point though, for those that may be just getting introduced to you, could you tell us, actually what is ACEDS? What does it stand for?
Yeah, so ACEDS is the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists. It is the world's leading organization for training and certification in e-discovery.
Gotcha. And so, yeah, I think it's very interesting in terms of, remember when we got started in e-discovery, there was no particular training. And I remember it's like, are you certified in this? Or, does it really matter for what we do? And I think, ACEDS was one of the first organizations to actually put a test around what people understood around that. And so that was one of the things that was fascinating to me in terms of, okay, it's a pretty broad category and there's a lot of it depends in e-discovery. It was, and I was fascinated by the fact that somebody could put a test to it. So, so currently now, tell me a little bit about the organization and some of the things that you're doing within ACEDS.
So it's really grown, and we're really quite proud of some of the things we're doing. We've been focused for the last year or so, and it takes you time to get up to speed when you join an organization that has the kind of community impact that we have. But over the last year, we've been really focused on making the member experience better, improving the training, streamlining the certification. We obviously pivoted to online training and certification during the pandemic. The exam itself and all the study materials got a refresh. We looked at everything. The laws change, and whenever you're running any kind of psychometrically sound credentialing program, you need to periodically update the material and make sure it's current. So we went through that. We also updated our foundational program, the EDEX program, the eDiscovery Executive Program. We launched the eDiscovery Technical Certificate in partnership with an organization called NSLT, which provides not just the theory behind eDiscovery on a foundational level, but exposure to all kinds of, I think, 9 or 10 different eDiscovery and litigation technology softwares. So that's been really valuable and been really useful to members. But we've also been focused on membership and making the membership sort of value proposition better. And we do obviously newsletters. We do 100 webinars a year. We've got 28 chapters around the globe where people meet and gather and have educational events and stuff like that. But we also relaunched the mentorship program, which has been really valuable. One-on-one mentors who are veterans throughout the industry, for folks who are up and coming or trying to study better for the certification exam, or if you just want a resume review, we'll connect you with a mentor. We launched study groups to help people study in groups for the certification exam. And recently we brought on CLE credit, free CLE credit for all members. And that applies mostly for lawyers and paralegals who need those mandatory CLE credits every year, but we brought that on board. And we're working on a whole bunch of stuff. I'm happy to tell everybody that I'm working diligently on preparing a project management in eDiscovery certification on the heels of the book. So
that's awesome.
It takes time. It takes time to develop, and I'm working on it. It's kind of in outline form. It's been in that form for quite some time, but now I'm finding I have some time to work on it. So working diligently on that, and hopefully next year. So
let's talk, because I mean, there's sometimes people don't really understand what goes behind actually developing a certification program. And in our conversations, I was amazed at all the work that actually goes to the scientific side of testing. So you mentioned psychometric type of evaluations and how you write questions, and tell us about how ACEDS actually builds tests and make sure that it's they're solid, they're authentic, and it's really testing for what it's supposed to be testing.
Yeah, so I should probably go back to a little bit of the origin story. And the origin of ACEDS actually stems out of a small city in Florida known as Miami. In about the middle of 2010, a group of legal professionals, about 40, 50 lawyers, eDiscovery, lit support, from all segments of the industry, got together and decided that, we need some more standards in this space. The EDRM existed, and that was a great workflow, still is. But how are we managing risk here? How do we know someone knows what they're talking about when they say, I'm an eDiscovery specialist, or I'm an eDiscovery project manager, or back then we used to say analyst or whatever, right? And so these folks sat down and said, look, here's the the 5 or 10 things that you need to know in each sort of phase of an e-discovery project, whether that's the laws that govern it, how to implement the litigation hold, how to properly preserve information, how to collect it, how to review it, produce it, and so forth. And so they sat down and identified learning objectives in each of those things. And when we talk about psychometric and learning science, all we're really talking about is a well thought out process, a plan. Here's the learning objectives. Here's the material that meets those objectives. And here's the questions that test your knowledge of that material, right? And then the last step in that process is the test is tested, and data science is used to look at those exam results. And it's what we call a beta test. We just launched in Canada, and we're running a beta exam right now. And we should talk about that. But the psychometricians look at the answers to those questions and decide whether the question is valid or not. And there's a whole data science behind it. Don't ask me to explain it. But at the end of the day, it's about the validity of the question. Right. For example, though, if everyone gets a question wrong, there's probably something wrong with the question, right?
Right. Well, who writes the questions? Is it the test makers?
Yeah, no, we actually employ subject matter experts from throughout the industry who sat down. Like I said, these 40 or 50 lawyers wrote these questions. I think you participated in that process, if I'm not mistaken.
I did, but I wasn't going to give myself credit. So
I'm happy to give you credit. There's tons of people who worked on this, and there's been even more over the years. We've probably got over 100 people that have worked on it at this point, because every couple of years we do a refresh. And so back to the validity of the question is really, they look at a question. If everybody's getting it wrong, there's something wrong. Conversely, if everyone's getting it right, there's probably something wrong with it as well. So they look at it. There's all kinds of scoring. Think about it like any standardized exam, whether it's the bar exam, the GMAT, or the SAT. All those kind of exams are designed in the same way. It's standardized exam testing. And the difference here is obviously you get a credential that certifies that you are competent in this area. And depending upon your score, it obviously indicates your degree of competence, right?
Right.
So it's not really rocket science, but there is data science behind it.
Gotcha. So yeah, and I think one of the key things that, especially in the early days of ACEDS, there was always a thing of, why would I want to get certified? Is what is this test? Is it really going to help my career? Are you seeing more and more job descriptions out there requesting people to be ACEDS certified or equivalent from a certification perspective in technology? Is it helping people with their careers?
Absolutely, and we've got good market research that proves that point. In fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday. Talking to a guy. I started mentoring a guy in, I want to say 2014, 2015. And he's now like a rock star in the industry. And we were talking yesterday about, career prospects. And we're seeing more and more that, the SAEDS certification is coming up in job descriptions, not as a mandatory requirement, but as a preferred requirement, because it sets a baseline. And you know this, I don't have to tell you this. It sets a baseline of knowledge. If someone passed the exam, they have a baseline of knowledge. You might have different technology, and we don't teach to technology. We don't teach you how to use a particular software. We are software agnostic. We teach process. You need to understand basic concepts and principles in order to demonstrate your competence. And so, yeah, we're seeing it more in job descriptions. Obviously, there are 1,500 people in the industry who are actually certified.
That's not enough. We need to get more.
Yeah, we certainly need more. Thousands more have taken the exam, or either either passed or allowed their certification to lapse. And we're always trying to welcome those people back in. So anybody out there who took the exam and passed and you're not a member, come back, please. Obviously we're trying to grow the programs and expand our reach. The project management electronic discovery will be one of those efforts.
And you had mentioned Canada, so you're expanding into Canada?
Yeah. So, we've always been an international organization. We've got chapters in 28 cities, most major US cities. Dublin, Ireland, London in the UK, Benelux in mainland Europe, South Africa. We're going to launch soon in Australia and Latin America. And last year we launched 2 chapters in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto. And it's really, if you think about it, there's an interest comes in, right? Someone expresses interest. We have a model where we reach out and we try to find people who are interested in sort of owning that local market, if you will, in terms of providing a place for members to gather, for educational opportunities, and of course for preparing for the exam. So Vancouver and Toronto really took off well. We've been wanting to, and there's been a great deal of demand over the years for geographically sensitive exams, and it just for whatever reason hasn't happened. But Canada to the north of us, very similar legal system, common law based, except Quebec, of course, which is, you know, civil code state. But the processes are essentially the same. What's different are some of the laws, the rules, the regulations. So we assembled a team of experts from Canada, and we looked at the laws. How are they different? I mean, the concepts are pretty much the same. The notion of preservation is preservation no matter where it is, right?
That's right.
There are some nuances to the law around things like privilege and attorney-client relationships and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the core sections, the core e-discovery process are the same no matter where you are, right? Identification, preservation, collection, processing, review, and production. Doesn't matter what your laws are. Those are things like that. Now, in Europe, you run into GDPR issues with processing and so forth. So, and we're looking to expand beyond Canada. So back to Canada, though, we launched the Canadian beta exam earlier this year. We're actually just wrapping up. We'll get results out to them in the next month or so. And then we'll have a formal launch, I think in Q4 this year. But we're looking at the UK, we're looking at Ireland, and we're looking at Australia as our next certification exams.
That's awesome. And I believe there's a big event that you are doing some support of for next week, right? And I think you volunteered me to do a presentation.
There is a huge event. And what you ask what's consuming my time right now, and that's it. So next week is the IG World Expo and Conference. ACEDS has been asked to sort of lead the e-discovery track. And so we're a big sponsor there. We've got about 15 sessions going forward, all kinds of different topics. It's a big IG conference. It's taking place in this 3D virtual environment. Anybody who's ever seen Verbella is kind of cool. EDRM used it last year.
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was a fun experience. I've got to figure out how to use my Oculus Quest on it. So
yeah, no, it's kind of cool. So, but it'll be like you go into the software, you create an avatar, you run around this campus. There's an actual auditorium with a stage where presentations will take place. So it's kind of like being at a conference without being at a conference. It's really suitable for the for these pandemic times we live in. So it's it should be fun, but it's consuming a lot of my time right now.
Yeah, I believe I'm doing one on privacy and e-discovery, and dealing with, how cross.
That's right. We volunteered you. You didn't even know.
I did not know. So it's like I got an email Monday morning. Hey, but I'll be doing that with Jason Thompson. So thank you for that. So Mike, how do people get a hold of you? Any other shameless plugs you want to put in there? What can we wrap up with?
I mean, it's easy to get a hold of me, mquartararo@aceds.org, or just reach out to our customer service desk. They always know how to find us, customer service@aceds.org. The website is a good place. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. Don't hesitate. If you need something, reach out. My door is always open.
Yeah, you've always been one of the more accessible people that I've engaged with. I mean, you typically respond literally within 2 hours of an email being sent to you. I've always been impressed with your ability to respond very quickly. So
I don't go to bed at night until my inbox is empty.
I have an inbox. I have my rule, and this is what I've done. So number one, and I love this. This is good. These are good nuggets of information. I have struggled with for the last 30 years as emails develop in terms of email management. I know a lot of people do like foldering and archiving of each either email. I realize that doesn't work, and we have to use the search functionality that we have built in. Google kind of taught me this. I started what I call a Google methodology, where once I read it, I archive it and I'm done. So I try to keep what I call an mbox 20. I'm sorry, an inbox 20 approach, which is no more than 20 emails in my inbox before I'm done for the day. And you have to give yourself grace. If there's 40, sometimes it's 40, but your target and the goal is 20. So if you're getting, if you're doing inbox 0, dude, I'm impressed.
It's just a process, and I'm one of those people that has a very highly structured foldering system. So everything goes into a folder. It doesn't, and you know how Outlook in particular lets you know if something's unread in the folder. So I know I've got something to do there. And I'll be honest, there are days when, a couple of emails like linger in the inbox, but they're read, they're responded to, or if they're not responded to, the only reason they're there is because that's work tomorrow morning.
That's right.
Respond to those, right?
Yeah, so exactly.
It's a process like everything else.
Yeah, the other thing I discovered that I've been using more and more often, because as a new entrepreneur, again, one of the things I've been doing is a lot of times you have sleepless nights, but I don't want to send emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I actually use the scheduling function. So there's a function within Outlook that you can basically say, send this at 7:30 a.m. and it doesn't go out until that time comes in. Now you have to be connected in Outlook. So if you just you turn off your computer, it won't send it out. But I think that's been helpful so that people don't think I'm a sleepless idiot.
Yeah, no, there's
just a regular idiot.
There's a certain entrepreneurial pathology that comes with 3 a.m. emails, and
that's right. So, but
you want to avoid that, because I think the rest of the world thinks you're crazy if you're up at 3 a.m. sending business emails.
That's right. So, but we all know that as you've been an entrepreneur for a while. I mean, as you well know, it's hard to sleep sometimes when you've got so much on your head, in your mind. So, but anyways, Mike, thank you again for joining us today for this version of Out of Curiosity. You've answered a lot of questions and things. I've learned a lot of things today, and I hope our audience has as well. And as you mentioned before, I would suggest connecting with Mike on LinkedIn, setting up on ACEDS. Even if you're interested in membership, I think people can subscribe to your Facebook page and your LinkedIn page and things like that, so they can keep informed on the webinars and things like that, which are open to the public, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So thank you again for joining us, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as well for Out of Curiosity. And Mike, I can't thank you enough. For those, please subscribe. We're now on Apple and we're now on Amazon, Spotify, and there's another one, Dean. YouTube. Thank you. So please, please subscribe. And if you've got questions or audience, other people that you'd love to learn about and you'd like to share, please put some suggestions. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm Jason Velasco, and thank you for joining us for this Out of Curiosity. Have a great day. Thanks Mike.
For having me.
All right.